Hey everybody, I'm David Pakman from CoinFund. I'm the last talker on this stage, which means I can take all the time I want, but I won't. I'll get you guys to cocktails very quickly. I'm here to talk to you about NFTs, sports NFTs to be very specific. Let me just tell you why you're here to listen to me. I'm not so sure, but I'll try to give you a good reason. So I'm with CoinFund. We're one of the oldest and longest running firms focusing on crypto native investment. We've been investing since 2015, seed stage, venture stage, liquid stage, and I've been playing around with NFTs for a long time. I was the Series A lead of Dapper Labs. I sit on the board there. That's the company that invented the first NFT standard and invented the first sports NFTs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But let me just refresh your memory about what we're here to talk about. NFTs, we all know, are property rights for intellectual property. We can take any kind of digital good and we can turn it into something that we can now own. We couldn't do that with digital objects, but we've been able to do that with physical objects forever, right? We can own physical things, but in the digital world, we couldn't own anything digital because it was too easy to copy. So blockchains changed that and let us own digital goods. Any kind of digital good, not just a JPEG, could be a song, could be a movie, could be a book, could be a font, could be code. So we're in a world now where we can own digital things, and that unlocks some really cool business models. In the digital world, because we couldn't own digital things before, we had to stream and rent everything because we couldn't do anything except control access. But now we can buy and own things. Now, why is that cool? Well, it's because we as humans like to collect things. We've been collecting for millennia. And so we collect digital things too. And there's other reasons why we like to own digital things. We might think it's going to go up in value, or we might want to collect a whole set for nostalgia reasons, or we might want to use the object that we buy for doing more things, like trading with others, or for using them in games. So how's that gone, this invention of NFTs? Well, not so bad, actually. 10 million people have bought more than $50 billion of NFTs in the last 2.5 years. It's an extraordinary amount of money spent. Yes, probably 1/3 to 40% was wash trading, as we all airdrop farmed and reward farmed. But so even if you cut it in half, even if $25 billion of NFTs were sold in the last 2.5 years, that makes NFTs the most successful consumer product released since the smartphone. Like, it's a real big deal, and only a small number of consumers have responded. 10 million people is not a lot compared to the 4.5 billion on the internet, but it tells us that we're onto something, and people buy them, as we talked about, for different reasons. Also, it's kind of cool that just in a short amount of time, NFTs really tipped into the mainstream. This is a clip from Saturday Night Live. If you know the show, they did a sort of send-up on NFTs about 1.5 years ago. So in a short amount of time, it kind of captured the imagination of consumers, which also tells us that we're onto something. The media was fascinated by the idea that us stupid consumers were spending our hard-earned money to buy JPEGs. Of course, that's not what we were doing. We were buying ownership in a piece of intellectual property that we identify with. Maybe it helps us show off our identity. Just like we do that for physical things. We've collected art and LPs and CDs and wine and shoes and antiques. And so we collect digital things too. And so the media might have sort of caught the wave on the way up, and of course now they're beating us up on the way down. So where are we in the journey of NFTs? Well, you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. This is one of the longest observations about new technology, that it tends to follow this curve. And can you guess where we are with NFTs? We're right there. And it almost follows exactly the sales numbers that I showed you on the second slide, that we peaked in like Q1 of 2022, and now we're doing about $1 billion of NFT sales a month. So it's not a tiny amount of activity, $12 billion a year, but it's nothing like the hundreds of billions of dollars at the market's peak. But we have to dig out of this trough. We have to find real use cases that inspire not just NFT degens trading, but we need to inspire mass market use. The $1 billion a month or so of NFT sales that are happening now, that's about 30 to 50,000 people who are mostly NFT pro traders. They're on Blur, they're using Catchment, they're in the Discords, and they're flipping NFTs, mostly because there's economic reward for doing so. It's not a bad thing, but it's not the mainstream market, right? We sort of lost a lot of the normies. So what are we gonna do to re-engage the normies? Well, that's what I want to talk to you about. That's why we're gonna talk about sports. First of all, like, what types of NFTs, where did we see activity? Well, digital art, like clearly some of the early NFT sales in generative art, where we're using algorithms to create art, that has responded with, I would say, relatively a small number of people, but still, it's certainly a category of NFTs that had sales. Collectibles, the biggest category of profile pictures, the Bored Apes and the Cyberpunks, right? This is where the mass majority of NFT sales occurred. And then sports would be the third category that really tipped, just to give you a sense. So the first major sports NFTs were NBA TopShot. You remember that exploded out of the gate. That property, which is still live today, has done about $1.5 billion of sales to about 1 million people. So it's high ARPU, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But sports fans tend to be among the most engaged audiences for any product. They have a sort of rabid fandom for their teams or for leagues. And so that it's not surprising that sports NFTs resonated early on with their consumers. Another product that's done pretty well, I'll show you the numbers in a second, is SoRare, the company that launched the sort of fantasy football, European football, soccer, with the English Premier League and with La Liga, where you are buying cards of players and then assembling fantasy football teams. And that's also an interesting market. So we saw those three areas of NFTs kind of work pretty well. The next four are areas that haven't worked very well, to be honest. Digital fashion and avatars, buying land in the metaverse, music NFTs, and then real-world NFTs, where you buy an NFT that corresponds to something physical in the real world. I'm not saying it's been zero, but there have been much, much smaller sales traction than the other categories. And so I think they're promising, but it's not where the action's been. Let's take a look at some of those numbers. So you can see here the top 15 collections of NFTs that have sold an all-time. Axie Infinity, which was talked about in the last presentation as the top-selling game, did about $4 billion of sales. And then we have a lot of the collectibles, like Bored Apes, the CryptoPunks, Art Blocks. As I said, TopShot did about $1 billion. The Nike Clone X stuff we'll talk about in a second, $845 billion. And you can see SoRare down at about 500 million. So these are really big numbers, but things fall off pretty quickly after this. But what I wanted to show you was not just the total dollars spent, but take a look at the number of buyers column. So which ones attracted the most number of users? Well, it's the gaming ones, Axie and the two sports products, really by like at least an order of magnitude. Now, you might say to me, well, that's obvious because the PFP collections only have 10,000 SKUs in them. There's only 10,000 Bored Apes you can buy. So why would there be 1 million buyers? There's only 10,000 people who can hold them at any one time. It's true. So by design, those communities are meant to be small, which is another reason why they haven't fully tipped into the mainstream. But if our goal is to get NFTs adopted by mainstream users, focusing on gaming or even sports gaming is probably a reasonable place to spend time. One question I get asked a lot is, which chain should we develop on if you're trying to build NFTs? I just thought I'd show you the amount of sales volume of all time across the different chains. So obviously Ethereum, super dominant, 36 billion, but Ronin, which was the chain for Axie Infinity, Solana, Flow, Polygon, all pretty credible. And in fact, probably there's more potential in the non-Ethereum chains given their speed, their throughput, and their ability to onboard users a little bit easier than the sort of Ethereum experience. So I think we're going to have a diversity of chains on which NFTs will be built. One type of NFT that's critical, especially around sports NFTs, something we don't see a lot of, and honestly I'm pretty disappointed, are dynamic NFTs, or NFTs that change or improve over time after you've bought them. Sort of silly that we made them static, given that an NFT is basically software. We can attach a smart contract or execution code to an NFT. Why wouldn't we offer some benefit to you the longer you hold it, or the things you do with it? In fact, if the whole point is to discourage flipping, why wouldn't we make an NFT get more rare and develop new properties the longer the first buyer or the second buyer holds it? So this is one NFT that's starting to do some interesting things like that. This is the Bored Apes that launched the land that's part of Otherdeed. So if you buy a land unit, they sold 561 million, by the way, in 24 hours. That these land units will be usable within a forthcoming metaverse, but that the land units evolve over time the way real land does. So I'm watching closely to see what happens. Do consumers respond to dynamic NFTs that have improved properties? There's the proverbial, like, well, if you use a sword in a game and the sword slays the dragon, the sword gets, +1. This is a long established gaming concept that should be reflected in NFT in-game items. I did want to talk a little bit about, since Nike is such an interesting part of sports, the Clone X experiments. Nike bought Artifact, an NFT issuance studio that has released some of the most exciting kind of digital fashion. They've done it in a couple different ways. They've released digital shoes. They've released fidgetals, which are the combination of an NFT with a real-world product. So like buy the sneakers in real life, get an NFT attached to it. So, but the Nike Artifact Clone X collab did 20,000 units, sold $845 million in sales. It's an unbelievably successful digital fashion product with a physical tie-in. And you can see how that's helped. This is a slide showing you all the sales of sort of all digital fashion NFTs. Many of them are sports related, the Nike and the Adidas ones. And you can see Nike just dominated with the sort of dark blue bar chart there. So again, another indicator that consumers are responding to sports related NFTs. I did want to show you a slide on the data of the phygital volume. Those are the physical goods tied to a digital NFT, and you can see that Artifact has done about 70% of all phygital volume. So really dominating this sector pretty impressively. So remember, the thing that I like most about NFTs is the ARPU, the average revenue per user. If only 10 million people have spent $25 or $50 billion for NFTs, the average revenue per user is high. I've seen it as low as about $900 on an annual basis, but just in the last 30 days, the ARPU is trending between $3,000 and $4,000. So the people who buy NFTs buy a lot of them, or at least they spend high for them. This is what a lot of game publishers like about it. So let's get specific on gaming. Sports is such an obvious place to dig in with NFTs because with sports, as I mentioned before, we have high long-term fan engagement, very high monetization. Consumers spend a lot on sports-related merchandise, attending games, sports subscriptions for television access, jerseys and apparel, merchandise, collectibles, fantasy. And as I say, there are multiple reasons to own an NFT around sports: for wagering, for gaming, for collecting, for fantasy, to unlock physical access. One of the biggest concepts in sports today are to have personal seat licenses for season ticket holders. There's no reason why that can't have a digital tie-in as well. And let's just take a look at these two charts. The upper right shows you the largest sports leagues around the world by revenue. These are big sports, businesses. The NFL is a $17 billion business. It's largely just a US phenomenon. Major League Baseball number 2. The NBA, which has 800 million fans worldwide, it's about a $9 billion business. They're big businesses. And then I just wanted to show you the value of teams. These are individual sports teams around the world. And you see Manchester United just sort of at number 15 or 20, and the Dallas Cowboys at the top. But these are enormously valuable franchises, so tying digital merchandise to them makes a lot of sense. And also, the reason sports leagues and teams love to include betting and interactive elements to sports are because it improves engagement. Sports bettors are 2x more likely to attend a game or watch a game, and this is a fascinating statistic. So the NFL, as I said, is a $17 billion a year business. That's all revenue associated with the NFL. On the Super Bowl weekend, 50 million people wagered $16 billion. So in one weekend, on one game, the biggest game of the season, the entire size of the league's revenues was spent on basically gaming, wagering. And so this is a thing that people want to do, and there's no reason why we wouldn't want to tap into it more. Another stat for you, fantasy sports is about a $9 billion a year business just in the US. That's a little smaller than some of the other industries we talked about here, but with this is demonstrated real-world spend by consumers, and one of the ways to predict what will happen in the digital realm is to look at what people do in the real world and try to create digital versions of or digital proxies for the same type of behavior. We know that DraftKings and FanDuel in the US has been incredibly successful creating in-game betting and basically betting on almost anything. And they've enlarged significantly the size of the sports wagering market. So it makes sense to take markets like fantasy, wagering, and collecting and transport digital products into those. And so my argument is the place we will see lots of consumer traction as more and more leagues, teams, and sports adopt NFTs and digital products, and more studios bring interesting products to market. And we're just getting started. You know, horse betting alone is an $11 billion a year business in the US. And so, you know, one of the first successful NFT games was Zed Run, which was sort of an attempt at building a sports betting, or not just horse betting, but horse lineage, horse racing gameplay, and had some early success. There's one called Silks that's out now, getting some modest success. We'll see the NFL All Day, which was released by Dapper, is sort of a similar gameplay to NBA TopShots, and of course the So Rare has the English Premier League and La Liga football, and is also just released an NBA game. So we've got fantasy, we have collecting, we have sports betting and gameplay, NFTs all coming to market, and I think my observation is that this is probably one of the most likely categories of NFT products to try to bring us out of that trough of disillusionment where I oriented you before. At least I'm hopeful, because we'll all benefit from more consumer adoption. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you guys get some cocktails tonight and enjoy Friday night in Denver. I'm David at CoinFund.io and Pakman on Twitter. Nice to meet you all.